The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of Aletheia Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
Hello guys, hello everyone. Welcome to episode number 2 of the Upper Story podcast. The Upper Story is just a real casual discussion with young Christian people, and we talk about a number of things that just aren't normally talked about in the church. So if you're tuning in now or in the future, thank you for being here, and welcome back if you are coming from episode 1. Tonight's topic of discussion is just relationships, and specifically what do healthy God-focused relationships look like. So if you've been with us before, we've only done one, this is episode number 2, then you know that in order to help facilitate our discussion, we pulled some articles from online to sort of get the feel for what people think about relationships in general, or what people think about the given topic, rather, in general. Tonight it is relationships. So we pulled some articles to help us facilitate discussion, and our lovely panel of people here, our couch of people, will help shed some light on tonight's given topic. So without further ado, I'll allow the yellow couch to start talking, starting from myself, I guess. So my name is Adam, and I'm just the sort of moderator helping to keep the discussion ticking. And I guess we'll move this way, if we will.
This way?
Yeah, you.
My name's Josh. Whoa. Our live audience is causing issues over there. Mm-hmm. My name's Josh. I'm the senior pastor over at Aletheia Bible Fellowship, and right now I'm playing engineer.
Good thing you're not wearing a red shirt. My name's Caitlin, and I was here on the first episode. I had a really good time. We were talking about identity, and I actually am not a member here. I go to Prince of Peace out in Battleground, and I'm just really interested in talking about important issues that, as we said, aren't often talked about in the church, but really should be.
Hi, my name is Jen, and I am a member of Aletheia. And yeah.
I'm Hayden. I'm also a member of Aletheia and one of the guests here tonight. Go, Jasmine.
Hello, I'm Jasmine. I am a member of Aletheia. I'm the intern of External Ministries. And while we're at it, we should all do our ages because that's what we did last time. I am 21.
I'm 15 right now.
23.
17.
38.
27. So
That's the
we are
old side of
here
the couch.
hosting our couch discussion from Aletheia Bible Fellowship in Portland, Oregon. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. So how this will go is just I'll read a truncated version of the article that we've pulled from, and then we'll ask a series of questions, and I'll just allow the discussion to organically flow. I think Jasmine over here will post the article on our Facebook video if you want to follow along via that way. So we'll post the article, I'll read a truncated version of it so we can sort of all be on the same page about where we're coming from as a starting point, and then these guys and gals will just sort of talk about relationships from whatever angle we're coming from given the article. So that's how it'll work, and when it's maybe exhausted, we'll just move to the next one. We have a few articles, so we can just move freely and organically as we need to. So without further ado, I suppose we can get started. So I'll read the first sort of truncated article. Jasmine's going to post it on the video, and here we go. Humans are social animals, and connection is important to forming and maintaining a sense of happiness in lives. But some connections just aren't meant to last. Holding on to people despite a bad connection can end up draining your energy or even stunt your personal growth. You've heard the importance of decluttering homes every now and then, but what about friendship decluttering? The notion may seem harsh, but it's important to stop and reflect on the people in our lives that aren't bringing us value. The article goes on to talk about 3 main types of relationships that you may have: bad connections, pseudo-good connections, and real connections. And it says, when you control your environment, you control your life. If you cultivate the best friendships in your life, you will maintain a better quality of life all around. You're much more likely to reach your goals because the influence of the people you spend the most time with shapes your mindset more than you think. People who motivate you, support you, and see the best in you will consciously and subconsciously drive you toward what you want in life, and you'll ultimately achieve more. By cutting out toxic relationships, you will start to see a massive difference in yourself and how you see the world around you in a more positive light. Don't underestimate what a real friend can bring to the table. So we have a series of questions, guys. First of all, I guess I'll just allow you guys to speak your initial thoughts on it. A more pointed question would be, should we be viewing relationships as purely self-serving? Yeah, so we'll start there. What are your initial thoughts, and maybe what do you think about that as a starting point?
I mean, it's clearly not like a Christian perspective. Distinctively not. Because the issue is that it mixes some truth with some lies. And so the issue is you have the idea that, well, what's going to build you up, not people that are tearing you down. Like, that's kind of obvious. But it seems to then, it concludes from that essentially, as you're saying, relationships should be benefiting you. And so, if it's not benefiting you, you need to cut it off. But it comes from a very, like you said, a very self-serving perspective. Like, relationships from the Christian perspective are a lot more than that. They're not self-focused. I mean, imagine if Christ had been self-focused. He wouldn't have come down in the first place, let alone die on a cross. And so the idea is like, how can we then be self-focused in our relationships if that's who we're claiming to follow? And so the issue is if it's like, oh, I will only allow myself to be around people if they are going to be helpful to me. Like, you're going to find yourself alone. Like, you're going to be in a company of one, because guess what? We're all human, and people are going to mess up. And people are going to sin against you, more specifically. And so, if you cut people out of your life when they hurt you, you're going to be alone.
My initial follow-up to what we're talking about, you just at the end there said it, is what are people's standards for helpful for me even? Mm-hmm. What does that even mean?
Achieving your dreams.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, I feel like when people say, it's like everything is just based on like basically how you're feeling at that point in time, because your dreams, like Caitlin suggested, like that's going to change over time. So what's good or helpful or whatever, like that, it's not, and when it's based on feelings, it's not going to be consistent. So you can actually ever maintain that type of green tag friendship or whatever the article labeled it as.
The green label is the real connection.
The real connection. The real.
Yeah, I agree with what Caitlin was saying about there's like truths and lies in that, and it's definitely not, Christian focused at all. There are relationships where it's not going to be like peer level or 100% like equal, like that's not how it should be. It's like you're probably going to be doing some more work on this relationship because they need more work on that, or I think it's just like the type of relationships that you have. Like, you're not always going to find that similarity, and which I don't think is a bad thing. Like,
Yeah, I think the main thing that would help, because I think some of the truth of it is that there are different types of relationship. Mm-hmm. But the response is what the issue is. Because there's relationships where I have a very deep connection with people. I mean, like the people in this room often I'm able to connect with, I'm able to say what I'm really thinking and get feedback and just essentially just connect, and be supported and support one another. And then there's other people where it's like, it's not quite that. We can hang out, we have fun, but it's not like I can't always rely on them to talk about deep things with, or to if I need help, I don't necessarily call on them. And then there's like another category where there's people where it's like acquaintances and stuff. And so the reality is everyone we relate to, we have a relationship with. Like, we are very natural, as the article said, we are naturally social beings because God created us to be that way. I mean, if you look in the garden, it's like Adam went and he named the animals, and what do you find? He was like, I'm lonely. There's no suitable helper. And so the idea is it's like we're meant to be in relationship with one another. And so when we run into these problems, as we will, in different levels, the question in our mind shouldn't be, how can I cut this out of my life? How can I remove this uncomfortableness or this pain that this person is causing me? It's, how can I improve my side of it? How can I better myself? And how can I support this person? And that's going to vary significantly based on the type of relationship it is. Based on, like, where you guys are just together, and then, like, is it a boss? Is it a family member? Like, just all of those complex dynamics will come into play in how you should respond. But that's the thing, is it's a response. It's a desire to support that person because they need support in some way. I can guarantee it. And you shouldn't just be doing that to receive support in the future. Like, that's not the purpose of a relationship.
Yeah, I also just think about the, I think it's common in new believers where they've had a past life or previous life, and they've built these friendships with people, but then they start to realize that those friendships are actually bringing them away from God and not, benefiting them. And, well, not that they're not they're a negative impact, and they're not what they want to focus on. Like, they want to focus on God, but they're bringing them down. And I think there's that balance of, you don't want to say, okay, you're not a believer, I'm a believer now, like, bye. You don't want to shut them out, because that's not what we should be doing. But stepping back from that and saying, hey, this is what's going on, I'm here for you when you're ready to, like, do this, but I can't be in your life because of the choices that you're making, and that's not where I want to be. I think there's that balance too, where it's like, yeah, you, like what you said, like, you have to figure out how you approach that, and it's not in shutting that person out. It's like
a dynamic shift,
yeah,
rather than just like a cutting something off. It's just a change, I would say.
Do you guys find that that's more difficult from a Christian perspective than from a world perspective? Like, carrying on relationships that
like when you cut off a relationship and you move on through life, like that. Like, gravitate toward, because you have a deeper foundation in God. And I remember, like, really noticing that about my friendships post high school. Like, they almost all died, and not by any sort of, like, they were not rooted in anything. Like, even like my core group of friends, there's probably like 2 or 3 of us, like, and I would spend like most of my time at like for example, one of my friend's houses, like, and I like have a pretty intimate relationship with like him and his family even, but even that was pretty shallow. Like it wasn't ever rooted in our common relationship with God, and so it was always just surface level, and I didn't really realize that until like I began my relationship with God, for example. So and it wasn't because of any like bitterness or whatever. It's just it became very obvious to me like that's how relationships are, unless they are founded in something greater than yourselves.
Right, yeah, that's the thing, is it's also more challenging because you have a higher standard. Like, pretty much what you're saying is that they can just cut it off when they need to, but for us, we not only are supposed to respond in specific ways, but we're also obligated to maintain a much higher standard just in general, like ethically, relationally, and in those sorts of ways. But the thing is like, it's also more difficult, and it's more likely that those sorts of fracturing occurs just because most people don't have an experience of something greater, and so they don't know what it looks like to have something that's actually rooted rather than just a very surface level relationship.
Yeah. Has it been your experience that that type of relationship is necessarily different within the church than between believers and non-believers? And the reason why I ask that question is, so, you know, I am fortunate, I suppose, to be one of those people that grew up in the church. But the reason why I say I suppose is because I don't really have relationships with people that I grew up in the church with, where the relationship was supposed to be founded in God. The truth is that most of the relationships that I have now were afterwards in rejecting some of the cultural Christianity ideas, and there was a lot of taking for granted, almost treating church like it's high school, you know, like it's like if you're part of this class, then you just should be connected to each other, but then that connection is not really based on our love for each other. It's not really based on our Christian duty. It's more just based on our, what do you got there, Trident?
Yeah, you want some?
This
has been brought to you by Trident.
Brought to you by Trident.
The official gum of the upper room.
Yeah, upper story. Yeah, but yeah, like that's been my experience. My experience is relationship has to be made regardless of where you are, sure. Regardless of if it's in an institution that should outlast it. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, and I mean that relates kind of to what I was saying about. It's not surprising that much of Christianity still has this very surface level, very thinly rooted relationship idea, because again, we don't practice it and we don't hold it up as the standard. We hold up these very loose, like, oh hi, I see you on Sunday, sort of relationships. It's just like that's how it is. And without seeing, without being able to see that, the next generation is taught the same thing.
Yeah.
Then.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a good sample size for that, because I went from nothing to being part of Aletheia, where it's very like hardcore and intentful in every single thing you do, and so maybe, and perhaps that's what drew me to this church in the first place. You know, it was a completely opposite experience than I'd ever seen, and it was significant. So I don't know, but I hear what you're saying as far as that, like these people that you grew up with were supposed to have a higher level of understanding, and they still sucked. You know, like they sucked at who they're supposed to be, and I'm sure in every case, wherever you're coming from, those type of people will be there, like the sucky versions of that, or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, of course we're not supposed to be like that. And so I don't know, maybe I'm not a good sample for that, but
well, I think it's a good understanding of the sort of the cliche that if you're a person who has starved, then you're going to appreciate food better. Like, and that's really what it comes down to. Like, poor people who have been poor know how to live in excess. Is that what you'd say? Like, they know how to live with riches. But people who grew up rich, they have a really hard time with treating money correctly. And I think relationally, that's a thing. Like, if you never had relationships and you came into a place where relationships were valued, then you're going to care a lot more about those relationships. But when relationships are taken for granted, as to some degree they should be, right? Like, in our faith,
It should just be expected.
Yeah, in our faith, relationships should be expected. It should be the status quo.
Right.
But it hasn't been my experience that it is, and perhaps that's why all the epistles were written, right? Like, all the, you think about just the...
You guys are relating wrong.
Yeah, the interesting fact that right from the beginning, all of the original churches kind of sucked at it.
Yeah, this is how you treat each other. You treat each other at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think? I'm curious. What's your impression?
It's definitely harder to, like, as a Christian, to have a relationship with people that aren't Christian, because, like, I mean, being an evangelist, like, you have to have, like, that side of things to, like, have a relationship with a person to end up, like, bringing them to the church. And so, but when they don't want, like, for that to really be anything rather than surface level, it's, like, really hard to try and grow in that relationship, like, for the both of you. Or, like, you can also, like, there's always the opportunity that comes along to where it's, like, you can give them, like, wisdom of, like, how to go about things that are going on in their life, but it's, like, a lot of the time it's, like, they don't want to take it, so, and that's, like, really hard to see, too, so.
Yeah, how do you feel about, like, so the push is generally that there is... So, as Christians, we're supposed to live a holistic life. Christ is supposed to affect every aspect of our life. And so, when we come into contact with non-believers who don't share the same feeling, even ones that we're close to, and they connect on different levels, whether it's, sports or whatever it is, but they refuse to connect holistically, how does that, like, how do you navigate that? How do you guys navigate that? Like, do you just, like, then what's your go-to? Do you shut down relationship with them? Do you allow it just to connect on their terms? Like, how do you deal with that?
I definitely used to shut down a relationship because I, like, saw it in black and white. But I've really, like, pushed myself to, like, still grow that relationship and, like, try to, like, show them based on, like, in my own life, like, how I've grown in having a relationship with God, and, like, give them that as an example, and then that's pretty much what I constantly try to do for them, like, to, like, have, like, the opportunity of seeing that and, like, know that they don't have to just keep going down this path.
Right.
That they're going down.
So you try to keep the door open to a relationship.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing from you is that you don't compromise that area, like you hold that area, but maybe you, I don't know, how would you explain that? Like, you don't compromise the area of the gospel's effect on your life. Like, you still make it clear that is the gospel's effect, right? Yeah. I think that a lot of Christians compromise that, both in outside, this is kind of funny to say, but both in outside of church relationships, but even in church relationships. My experience with Christianity inside the church is that a lot of people have a prime narrative between them that has nothing to do with the gospel. So it's like, these are my buddies, and we happen to go to church together, as opposed to, these are people that I go to church with, and we happen to be buddies. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys understand the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. It's the idea that. Oh,
No, go ahead.
It's essentially like. Yeah, it's like actually a key distinction, because if the main focus is just a horizontal relationship, even though both of you have a vertical relationship, so horizontal is person to person, vertical is person to God. And so if both of you have a vertical relationship and that's not the focus, like that's not clearly recognized in how you relate with each other, it's going to affect it, and it's going to stunt this huge potential for growth. Because it's like, the reality is the ability to fellowship with one another as Christians is just like such a blessing, and we don't really realize that. We either take it for granted or don't do it. But the thing is it's like that is one of the main opportunities the Lord gives us to grow in holiness and grow in understanding, because you can, like, as iron sharpens iron, like, as one person can build the other person up, and yeah, there's so much potential because we're going at it together. That's why it was made that way. So in a way, it is easier.
Yeah, and one has to be the prime narrative, and I think if you really get into that this is kind of a touchy subject, but you really get into that when you look at relationships that seem bigger than the church. So family is a big one, right? So it's like, this is my brother, and because it's my brother, then I'm willing to betray the understanding of the church in certain areas. So I'm not going to talk to my brother about where he's sinning, because that's my brother, or that's my sister, or that's my mom, or that's my dad. Like, you really see that in family relationships, or sometimes with significant others. It's like, I'm not going to betray the things that as a church we stand for, because that would be betraying my family, and I need to be good to my family. Or I'm not going to betray the things that as a church we stand for, because I'm on this sports team with this person. I mean, it's a true thing, and so that's, to me, that's like, and sometimes to people that's like an even harsher betrayal of relationship than betrayal of the church. But one is the, like, eternal kingdom, and then the other is just a really small facet. Impactful, meaningful, all of these things, significant, even God ordained, but still a small facet of who we're supposed to be. So to me, I see that a lot in relationship. Have you guys had to make any choices like that?
I mean, the thing is it's like, they shouldn't be in conflict, I think, is the real issue. Mm-hmm. Like, your relationship with your family, like, if it's, like, the family is built upon the foundation of God's truth, that shouldn't be in conflict with a church that's built on the foundation of God's truth. And so ultimately, like, yeah, everything it's like, the family is supposed to be a ministry unit within the church, and the local church is supposed to represent the universal church. And so it's like members of a body, right? Like the arm and the leg, and those sorts of things. And so it's like, the arm shouldn't be fighting the leg. If your arm's fighting your leg, you have a problem.
Right.
And so when there's dysfunction where essentially the family is being prioritized above the church, or like, essentially if something's being prioritized over one another, that assumes that those are in conflict. And if those are in conflict, there's other issues going on in addition to the prioritization, because ultimately I don't think you should have to choose between those.
Yeah, it's like asking for special relationships, to, like, special pleading, really, of a relationship, to say, like, I'm going to create special rules for this relationship, and when you do that, then that's a problem. Like, I'm thinking about what you were saying, the arm shouldn't be in conflict with the leg, unless there's a problem with the leg, right?
Right.
And if there's a problem with the leg, like you have like a nasty ingrown toenail or something, then the hand has a responsibility to cut it out. That's a terrible
That
example.
I was thinking more like the guy in Australia who got his hand stuck in a rock and you had to saw it off.
Yeah.
His hand wasn't going
You're talking about
anywhere.
James Franco?
Yeah, James Franco.
Yeah. But
Based
you
on
understand
the-
you understand my point? Sometimes we do need to be in conflict, and that should always depend on the survival of the whole, right? And the whole is defined as the body of Christ. And so if Christ is the definition by which the whole defines itself, then it shouldn't be the family, because then that would be defining, the whole body of Christ as, the foot. So, I mean, that's a problem, and I think that's something that Christians really face, especially like your guys' age. That's something that Christians really face when they're in academia, right? And so it's a question of, like, when you look at Christians in schools, do you guys find that it's easy to find the other Christians in the schools, and that you are a unit of Christians within your school? Or is it more like you are autonomous, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying?
You're
Like, is it easy?
like,
are you guys one body in school?
Yeah. Or are you all on your own out there?
Yeah, is it the Wild Wild West?
It's
I can say
Wild
from
West.
really?
In yours?
I don't know. I mean, I obviously I didn't go to school the same time you did, but I'm trying to, like, be honest with my memory, which sucks. But like, I feel like when I was in high school, like, the people that were Christian, they kind of clustered,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know how vulnerable and deep they were. But I think that they gravitated toward each other naturally on some level. Again, like, whatever that means, like that maybe was really shallow. I don't know, because I wasn't part of that group, and I wasn't, a Christian back then. But yeah, I don't know. What is your experience? Those of you that are currently in school.
Well, my experience dating back to the 1950s.
That math doesn't add up. It doesn't add up.
I don't.
38.
He went to school. He's talked about it.
So I was in high school, and my first year of high school was 1994. And so back when I was in high school, what I remember, and I think it's still true, is that you could be Christians, but that was secondary unless there was, like, some persecution. And even then, you generally weren't Christians together, unless you were a specific type of Christian. So, like, basically, so the relationship that matters is the clique relationship. If you're on a sports team, for instance, it didn't matter if a jock was picking on a nerd. It didn't matter if the jock and the nerd were both Christians.
That's so sad.
But that was my experience. Unless, of course, it's a like pray around the flagpole, which I don't know if that still happens. But
That's not allowed
Yeah,
anymore.
right.
Yeah,
It's
that
not
sounds like
so
protested.
Christians, so the Christians would come and they pray around the flagpole like once a year or whatever to show how Christian they were. And then there was, like, a specific type, like, there were specific groups that were known for being more Christian than other groups.
Yeah.
So, like, the choir kids, they were always more Christian. But,
Ours was always more gay.
well, that's how it is. That's how it was. That's how it was in theater. That's how it was in theater. But the choir kids, they were always more Christian. And then the football team usually had, like, a Christian consensus or whatever. But generally, like, if you were going to... But then you had your after-school programs where you'd have Christians meet in some classroom where a teacher was supposedly Christian, maybe, too. But generally, there wasn't, like, a real relationship. And it's like, if you talk to each other in that group, you don't really talk to each other outside that group. I don't know what your guys' experience is. I know you didn't have an experience.
Homeschool.
Right.
Yeah, everyone in
That's a
my
cop-out.
homeschool was.
Everyone in your
How is
homeschool is
it
Christian.
community centers, Jasmine?
Oh, the community centers. I don't remember. I
Come
was
on.
11. I was socially awkward.
Do some
I am
favorite
socially.
reference.
It's continuing. It never worked.
It never worked. Oh.
But at work, I can talk about work because I worked at Kohl's for a solid 6 months, and
We're proud of her.
yes, be proud of me. But basically, for the first 3 months, I was pouting about working there because I didn't like it. I didn't like the people there. But then I basically made it a point to use that as a point of ministry versus being pouty. And then I did find like a couple people who are Christian, but it's really something it's like you don't tell anyone, like don't tell anyone unless you mention it, and then
They would say that?
no one said that, but that was like the air
That's
about
actually
it. Like
in our
everyone's
rules
like,
at school.
oh, really?
You said that's how people are at school?
No, that's actually a rule at school. You can't talk about being Christian or anything with Christianity.
Don't
ask,
talk, don't
don't
tell.
tell.
Yeah.
I don't like to do it.
Changed quite a bit since the 1990s.
Yeah, only some people are like stingy about it. Like, I don't know. I had a conversation in math class, like, about abortion, and she told us to not have that conversation like 3 times, or to have it like outside of the classroom.
Your teacher?
Yeah, and then the next table over was also starting to have a conversation about Christianity. She didn't do anything.
That's weird. Yeah, I don't think they can actually do that. Because it's teachers can't put onto the students, but students have the freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. So I suppose they can say that you have to be quiet.
They don't
you know,
like
in
offending
class,
people.
Right.
They're so scared.
Right.
Which is why we have to be very careful about our words.
Yes. Yeah. So then what do you do about that if you want to build... What do you do about that if you want to build a relationship with... If you could, if you can count, like how many deep Christian relationships would you say you have in your school?
Like 1.
That you personally have?
Like 1.
So your boyfriend?
Yeah.
Okay. So shout out to Isaiah, you made it on the list. Yeah, so like, does that bother you?
Not really, because, I mean, I've met Christians at the school, but it's like, every time I've met a Christian at school, it's always been, like, surface level, so, I don't know, and it's not people I'm usually gravitated to, like, it's usually someone that's, like, doesn't know really anything about Christianity. Like,
So they're more like cultural
Yeah.
Christians.
yeah. So, yeah. And then it's like I still had tried to have a relationship with them, but I don't know. Yeah. And then we also have a thing at school to where, yeah, we have our own Christian meeting group at school, which is like some sports thing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I get texts about it. It happens on Tuesdays in the morning.
Have you ever thought of going and checking it out?
Yeah, that's why I get texts about it.
Oh,
But I don't want to.
and you just haven't checked. How come?
Because I don't believe it's actually going to be that relational.
Mm-hmm.
And I can spend my time with people that would actually, like, grow from things that I, like, help push them towards.
So,
having-
do you think, besides you and the boy, do you think that there are others in your school who feel the same way that you do?
I think there could be. But I haven't really met them. There's, like, 2,000 something people at my school.
Yeah.
I think there's bound to be a few.
I wonder if you could, like, just like a band, you know, like you put up a flyer that's like, looking for a drummer, but you're, like, looking for, like,
But there's
Oh,
always
what?
codes.
Oh, what?
somebody who wants to go deeper than...
Looking for a real friend.
Looking for a real friend. Oh gosh. Yeah, that's too on the mark, man. Like people are gonna get triggered.
There's a movie waiting to happen based on a real life story.
Looking
One
for
man.
real.
The girl from Mean Girls who doesn't even go here.
Right.
Emotion.
I love that part.
Audience member asked, do you think that keeping a biblical worldview versus a non-biblical worldview can be easier in relationship in some instances?
No, like I was saying earlier, like you're actually working together, which means you have a common goal, and so you're working towards something, and it's based on God. It's who is the creator of the universe. And so if you're working together in accordance with God's intentions, things just naturally go better for you because you're not fighting against reality. And so, and with that, like, true collaboration, you can really grow. And so, I mean, yeah, there's something else I was thinking of, but I forgot what it was. The last part, but essentially that.
Yeah, obviously it can be easier, but it sounds weird to say, but it takes work for it to be easier. It's kind of like working out, right? It's like when you first start working out, you are only able to lift so much. The more you work out, the more you are disciplined about it, the more that you can lift. And if you go back and you lift, the 5-pound weight, that would be terrible. But the 5-pound weight that you couldn't lift when you started, that is going to be much easier. So it's like that. So yes, it can be easier.
It's okay, right. I just remembered what I was going to say. It's also easier because then you have the ability to together rely on the power of the Holy Spirit rather than just your own power.
Right.
That makes things a lot easier. In a sense, it's an easierness because you actually have the potential to do what is actually good and worthy of your time, and you have the ability to essentially to do that, and you're not relying purely on yourself alone. You're relying on the power of God, and you're being helped by another person who's also seeking that. That's a lot. It's going to be really difficult because you are fighting against something else. At that point, you then are fighting against sin of the flesh, sin from temptations from the world and Satan, and so you're going to be fighting new armies essentially, but you have the power of God. So
the question specifically was asking about non-believers.
Okay.
So to address that, yes, again, I still think it would be easier, but you're going to have to do harder work. The thing is that Christianity is reasonable, and the institutes of Christianity are reasonable. And so what I mean by that is it is meant to be what's best and useful for us. The things that God reveals to us in Scripture is meant to be what's best and useful for us. And so when we start acting that way, it works regardless of whether we believe or the other person believes it. It's also really convincing. So, for instance, if you have a bad relationship with your parents and your parents are non-believers and you're a believer, if you start acting the way that Jesus would act to your parents, it's very convincing to them that they should at least treat you with the level of respect. How hard is it so the Scripture says that we're supposed to have specific attitudes, and then it says, against these things there are no laws, right? Against the fruit of the Spirit, there are no laws. And that's the thing. If you're acting with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and, forgiveness and self-control, if you're acting this way towards somebody and you're treating them the way that you would want to be treated, which hopefully isn't masochistic or sadistic, hopefully, then they're going to want to be around you. They're going to like the way that you treat them, and they're going to treat you in kind, even without understanding why that works. And oftentimes it is, I think, and this is kind of what Hayden was saying, is it's a testament to the other person of the supremacy of your belief system. In other words, if you treat people as the Scripture says that you should, regardless of whether they believe it, and you leave the door open for that type of treatment, then that can actually bring them into Christianity. It's one of the most effective ways. Why are you treating me this way, even though that's not the rules of the game? So, but does it take more work? Yeah, it does take more work. It's also the most noble work. It's literally the work of Christ. That's exactly what Christ did. There were no believers before Christ. There were people who had faith in God. So there were truth seekers. There were people who believed in God, but they didn't understand anything until Christ, and actually not really until after him. So, yeah, it's his work on the cross where he died for sinners. All of us were sinners. So the idea that, we need to be willing to die for each other as long as we recognize that that the relationships we have are with people who have the same mentality as us. That's not really the Christian message. You know what I mean? The Christian message is, I die for you regardless, and especially in the footsteps of my Lord, which is, you know, if you're a sinner, I'm going to die for you. That's exactly what Christ did. So
Yeah, I find it really interesting. I've had those conversations with like non-believers. They want nothing to do with God, and like we've talked about like conflicts, and you know, I would talk to them about, you know, basically like the core values of, you know, what the Bible teaches, and they're just like, that's amazing. And it's like, okay, well, that's found in the Bible, like that's not me. And it's just interesting that they're so open to it, if it's, you know, presented in one way, but like if it's specific to God, it's just kind of like they shut down. But it's really interesting because, yeah, it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Are you guys afraid to say in a speaking like to what you were speaking about whether there are Christians who want deeper relationship in a 2,000 person school, are you afraid to say to a person who claims to be Christian, hey, we should be treating each other this way, and so I'm just going to like be that way to you? You know? What do you guys think about that? Or like in a youth group. That's my example. Like, you're talking about the 2,000 person school. My example is in a youth group because, you know, I grew up in youth groups. And I'll be honest, no offense to youth groups, but they're terrible. And you will find no such thing as youth ministry in the Bible. Just saying. So with that said, like, oftentimes they're like really terrible to each other, like the kids in the youth group. But have you guys given a lot of thought to just being an example of the relationship that Christ wants us to have, even with the people that claim Christianity but aren't really good Christians?
Well, yeah, because like Caitlin was saying, iron sharpens iron. So, I mean, in turn with helping them grow in their faith, like, and pushing for that relationship and, like, teaching them, like, what a relationship would be, like, it's also, like, preparing you to do that with, like, other people, and, like, it helps you learn more about relationship and, like, yourself, because you're trying to, like, teach other people that. So, yeah.
Do you think then that you'll ever attend that meeting?
I have no idea.
Because a place like that would be a good place to start, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's true of churches in specific. Like, a lot of people... So a lot of people will leave a church specifically because the relationships are dysfunctional. I try to remember Gomer. Do you guys know who Gomer is? Gomer was a whore.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That was married to Hosea.
I knew.
Yeah. So, in any case, but their relationship is an example. And I try to remember the fact that Christians, basically the bride of Christ is ugly. So, and as a shepherd, like that's my role, like that's my responsibility to love Christians the way that Christ would love them. But we forget sometimes. And so a lot of times people will, especially in this day and age with cars, a lot of times people will like jump churches, you know, and they'll church shop and church hop and were you going to say something?
No, I was just like, yes, that is true with cars. I got really excited.
But yeah, a lot of times people will jump churches, not because the doctrine's wrong, but because people have dysfunctional relationships. Mm-hmm. And Christians are not called to leave relationships. They're called to call each other to, what is the term?
Better.
Yeah, admonish. They're called to admonish each other, to say, hey, this isn't in line with this isn't in line with what the type of relationship we're supposed to have. So we need to have a correct relationship with each other, and that starts with me. It doesn't start with you. Like, you know, it starts with me having the right type of relationship with you, and hopefully you'll fall in line. And that means like taking off the table the idea of church divorce, because that's really what it is, like divorcing yourself from a church, or you know, and just being able to say, hey, we are brothers and sisters in Christ, and that is not something that goes away simply because I don't like you very much. I think it's okay, for the record, to say to another believer, I don't like you very much. I think that you're a dick. I think that that's okay to say, as long as what comes with it is, I want to like you.
I was just thinking about how earlier you were saying you don't have a lot of friends.
And now we know why.
And then now we I'm just kidding. Obviously, I know it.
You know,
But it's true. Like, man, people they frustrate the hell out of you with the way they act and who they are, and just I'm constantly like, I don't stay in this place.
Triggered millennial.
No, I don't stay in this place because I'm not supposed to. But I like think sometimes like, man, if it wasn't for our relationship in the church, I would not be friends with you. Like, you're too much work, or you are just completely overwhelming for me, or any number of things. And it's just like, or you're just not likable. Like you're saying, like kind of a dick. Like, screw you. I don't want to be around you. That would be like
your flesh.
Yeah. Flesh, exactly. So, yeah.
You can love someone, but not necessarily like them.
Yeah, although
Right.
I think you should always want to like them, and I think the end goal is always going to be that you do like them. I think I think that in a relationship, that is a hope that is a reasonable hope in Christ. I think that sometimes people don't think that. Like, they think in their mind that really oneness in Christ means that one day, we're all going to die, but they're going to have their part in the new heaven and the new earth, and we'll never have to see them.
I'm going to have my own room, and it's going to be decked out. There's not going to be any window, so no one can come see me.
Dream big. Your own room, huh? Dream big.
Oh, there's going to be lamps. Little dreams, or big dreams, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, and that's the thing. One of the other things I was trying to remember to bring up earlier is that the going back to the article,
Right, the article.
Whoa.
is that it was talking about like, well, you just need to like do what's best for yourself, right? And it's like, no, it's the exact opposite. It's you want to do what's best for furthering the gospel and furthering the kingdom, and that requires love. Agape love, which is like what Jen and Josh were just talking about, is that it's like, it's not self-seeking. In fact, it hopes that there would be enough reconciliation that you would be able to appreciate the person for who they are. And that's the opposite of what the world will tell you. The world will tell you to seek yourself and to seek the betterment of yourself. And if other people come into that picture, great, but only if they benefit you. And it's like, no, that's just not how it works. Like, and you'll see, that's why I was saying earlier that it just doesn't, because that's God's plan for us, when we try and go against that, you just end up alone. Like, that's the thing. Is you're either you're either a wealthy, like, manipulative person, or you end up alone. And so it's like, your choice. Like,
yeah, and it's regardless of whether you're in the church. There's so many people who end up just basically alone, whether it's in ministry or whatever. It's like they end up that old crotchety person that's in the church.
Get off my lawn!
You know, that care more about the placement of a chair in the church, or like whether, or you know, how a specific room is used, than they care about whether a person is starving, hungry, you know, is in need of some emotional care. It's like their concern is their concern, and that's it. And that's it's a really sad thing. And the church itself is not immune to that. Relationship has to be for intent, and we have to have a hope for it, even within the church, because we just can't take it for granted.
true relationship starts at the end of yourself. I mean, if you're coming into relationships thinking about, because even if you're not like, oh, well, I'm not going to try and manipulate this person, I'm not going to try them as just a mere means to an end. If your intent is still something about yourself, you're going to end up pursuing that, because that's what your flesh wants. And so you have to, like, take up your cross daily and reject that daily, or you will slip back into it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just like how the world defines good friendship, because at the same time that they're trying to say, you have to make sure that you find someone who's like really, it's going to put effort in you and like spend time with you. Like at the same time, it's also, but make sure it's furthering your goals, and you don't necessarily have to do the exact same thing for that person, because it's all about getting out of the relationship what you can get out of it. And at the end of the day, like, hopefully there would be some guilt there, like, oh, this person is being nice to me,
I'm leeching off of them.
Yes. I can just be a leech and everything is terrible.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it has to do with being eternally minded, and understanding and taking joy in the larger aspect of our faith, which allows us to understand that for us, the first fruits of a harvest aren't necessarily the harvest itself. And so it's like basically if somebody else partakes in the first fruit of the harvest, like, that's cool because everybody reaps the harvest. So if you put into a relationship and you don't get anything out of it because maybe you're the one who plants the seed or waters the seed, but you're not the one who actually harvests the crop, like, somebody else will get that first fruit, but you are going to partake in the crop. You're just not going to partake in it in this life. And so understanding that it's not all about this life,
Right.
is a huge aspect of it. And people, they just don't think that big. They just, everything is about this life. So, and that's a huge aspect.
And that's why I think, that's one of the main reasons why I think agape love it makes no sense in a secular mindset. Because
it's foolish to the world.
Yeah, it's completely ridiculous.
It's
like,
to the world.
Oh yeah, because it's like, why would I ever do that? This life is all I have. Like, you have 80 years and then you're dead. And it's like, well, pause and think about that for a moment. And then secondly, it's like, it makes sense why there's so many Christians that are susceptible to it, because there's so many Christians that are susceptible to forgetting eternality and having an eternal mindset. Right. Because if you don't have an eternal mindset, you're going to get bogged down. You're going to get bogged down in worry. You're going to get bogged down in, like, the temporal muddiness of it. And you're going to, like, it's going to seem pointless, because, like you're saying, you often won't reap the benefits of it. Mm-hmm. You may not even see that, like, what you actually did actually benefited that person. Mm-hmm. And that will really weigh down on you if you're not remembering that, hey, God is the one who's going to bring about the harvest, and I might not see it, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Like,
yeah, even if you think of, like, the way that Christ died for us, he did not see the benefit for that immediate. Like, at the time that he died for, like, sinners, people were being really mean, like, really terrible.
That's the
understatement of the year.
I know, but
people were so
mean. So mean. But, like, people were not treating him the way that he should have been treated, that anyone should have been treated. And at the same time, like, he had to have that eternal mindset and go through that suffering. Like we keep saying, like, you have to bear that cross and, like, take it on for that person. If I got lost in my train of thought, I got too amped up.
No, but you're right, though. And even take it, like, theologically, even Christ himself doesn't actually know when that harvest takes place.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting. He doesn't know the day or the hour of his return until he's told,
it's now.
In the Godhead, let's go.
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
So even theologically, like, he's basically waiting on the patience of God that all people will be saved. That's essentially the theology of it. So I think that's a sound point.
There was a point there.
Yeah. Wow, that really diverged from the question.
Do we have other questions about this article?
Just like I think we
covered them.
We exhausted it. You know, our questions of how we have an internal and external approach to the question. You know, how do we deal with it internally, and how do we deal with it externally to a world that doesn't hold the same worldview? But unless you guys want to shed more light on that, or think we've touched on it, I think we have.
Well, that water is very, very loud.
Sorry, it's also dangerous because I'm pouring water next to all of the technology.
I'm gonna skip the second article because it's too.
It's too the same thing.
It's too similar.
All
Yeah.
right.
So
we're already an hour in, so I think we're okay.
We're safe to do that.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
Sorry,
questions.
people.
Got it.
Don't hate us.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So the third article has to do with secrets in relationships. So I think Jasmine will post the article. Here's a short paragraph. There's several anecdotes that this writer gave. This maybe they're like a psychologist or something. They are. And talking about the effects that secrets have within relationships and the interworkings of that. Every family keeps secrets, usually about things they consider shameful. A successful businessman loses his job and pretends to his family that he's still working. A brother and sister won't let their school friends visit, afraid their mother will be passed out drunk on the couch. If you have a secret of your own, you know that often they are created with the best of intentions, the desire to protect ourselves or others, but maintaining them requires lies and subterfuge to get in the way of clear and meaningful communication. Problem solving becomes impossible when crucial subjects can't be discussed. Family conversations become stifled and trivial. Fear replaces ease. Those privy to a secret become uncomfortably bound to one another, while those outside it feel excluded, though they might not know why. Yeah, we can secrets involve shame, etc., etc. We don't really have a pointed question in regards to this article, but basically, what's your guys' experience with that been? Secrets.
So what are the ways in which we deal with it internally, externally? Can you?
Oh, the three questions or whatever.
Questions.
How would Christ or the apostles speak to the issue? How do we in the church address something like this? And then externally, how should the church speak to a non-believing world about something like this? Those are our three, framework questions. Try to keep it to that skeleton, but yeah. So the issue of secrets.
Well, I mean, I can say that secrets within the church is definitely it's something that's coming to a head in this day and age, especially because of our freedom of information, I suppose,
right.
In regard to sort of the nasty secrets that are kept by the church. So whether it's the Roman Catholic Church, I think the Archdiocese in New York, which I went to their church building this last January, February, whatever. It doesn't matter. But the Archdiocese in New York just released a list of priests that they had investigated and said were these are legitimate problems. So they just released that to the public. There's the whole thing with, is it the Southern Baptists?
Yeah, it's the Southern Baptists.
Same sort of thing. So I know in terms of secrets that way, it's becoming more of an issue as to how we should deal with secrets. But yeah, I don't know if that speaks to it at all.
I mean, the way I first thought of it was on a more very more local level of secrets. I think often are the result of relationships not having a fuller development, because if you don't have a fully a relationship that's developed to the point where you can actually be vulnerable with one another about important issues, like I was saying earlier, you're naturally going to have certain things you're not going to share with them. And if those develop into something where it's no, I'm actively going to not share that with them, I'd make that the point of it being a secret at that point. Well, yeah, no wonder that would cause further strain on the relationship. because suddenly it's like you're avoiding certain topics and the other person doesn't know why, and it seems like you're keeping them out of the loop and stuff. It's like, well, yeah, and then they don't feel like you trust them, and no wonder the relationship doesn't develop further. So it's like a self-perpetuating cycle. And so just having a clear idea of, like, is this something that would... Because there are complicated scenarios, like the mom that's passed out drunk on the couch, and it's like, do I go and tell all of my friends about that? Like, that's not something that, like, has to come up all the time. Like, and then at the same time, there's that idea of, like, being able to recognize in friendships and stuff when those things are probably should be shared.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of thing. Because when you are able to share those sorts of things, it actually often develops the relationship. Because that level of trust is shown on your part. The other person realizes, like, oh, they trust me. And so when you express that, then guess what? They're more likely to trust you. And if someone actually trusts you, guess what? They'll actually tell you what their needs are. And then you can actually support them. Because like I was saying earlier, oh, yes, you can support people. But honestly, people are pretty closed off about their problems a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. Or they're super vocal about them. It's usually an extreme.
Yeah, if there's two ends.
Yeah, they really are. It's like you either know all of their problems or none of them.
So, I mean, most of you guys are pretty fresh out of kidhood. I don't know what that is.
Childhood?
Well, yeah.
Kidhood?
I don't want to say childhood because that seems too young.
Kidhood makes it sound so much better.
Oh, I just love kidhood.
Kids didn't know anymore.
Young adolescents.
I will try not to articulate myself.
Sorry.
But most of you are just becoming adults, if not barely have become adults. And so my question is, how has that mentality affected you guys in terms of your relationship, when you can tell, like, adults are talking about certain things, you know, that could be meaningful, maybe they're not, but then you're, like, purposefully and knowingly kept out of the loop of it, you know, the earmuff mentality. Both within the church, outside the church, in your family. How has that affected relationship for you guys? What's your feelings on it?
That's always been, like, a pet peeve of mine, like, especially, like, when I was really, really young, because the adults are talking or whatever, or, like, the family members would, like, spell out the word because I thought I couldn't read.
Oh my god.
And I'm like, and I could.
So it's an insult to...
And I could. Or they're like,
Insult.
Caitlin, plug your ears. And I'm like... And, like, when I was younger, I didn't, like, think much of it, but it was, like, an insult to my intelligence. And then, like, when I was, like, a preteen, like, late elementary and preteen, I'm like, I didn't realize it now, but essentially what I was hoping for is, it's like, how am I going to learn to deal with these adult issues? Like, am I just going to, at some point at 18, just be thrust into adulthood? Like, maybe it doesn't have to be, they don't have to know all of the nasty details of every situation, but being able to talk to your children about, like, hey, this is essentially what we're going through right now. This is what we're thinking about that. That's a freaking perfect teaching moment. Like, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is that's a teaching moment. Like, this is actually, guess what? We're your parents. We actually struggle with stuff.
I got pulled over on the way I came back from cabin this weekend, whatever, and I got pulled over on the way there, and I got a freaking ticket, which sucks, by the way.
Yeah, it does.
And my son was, like, worried, like, we're getting pulled over, and, cop comes up, and nice cop, and everybody does this thing, and, I get a ticket, and then, I thought it was an awesome teaching moment, if not a crappy moment personally.
Yeah.
It's, like you're saying, like, I look forward to those teaching moments, but sorry to steal your momentum.
No, it's a perfect analogy, yeah.
It was a moment where I could have been like, oh no, don't worry about it all, everything's fine, don't worry about it, son. But it was like, no, like, I broke the law, like, I wasn't paying attention, that's not an excuse, like, and I got a consequence for it, and it's good, because now I know, like, reminder, don't be lazy, and, all these different things, and, yeah, it's good. I was just thinking about, one of our questions, how would you deal with a non-believing world? We're talking about secrets. Do you guys, did you guys ever watch, I know you did, obviously. Did you guys ever watch Sons of Anarchy?
No.
I've seen a couple episodes of it.
Well, great show. You should watch it. How I would tell the non-believing world about secrets would be to watch that show, because secrets kill,
and what they do.
secrets kill people. Like, that show is
That's true.
That show is like,
extremes.
that's how I define that show. Is it's a show about secrets that could have been avoided and lives could have been saved.
Of course, you can get the same extremity by watching King of Queens.
Yeah.
Where
It's a little lighter subject matter, too.
Right. But it's true, like almost every sitcom, for instance, is based upon people either telling secrets or having miscommunication.
And this is why I can't watch the
I know,
sitcoms.
It's the secondhand,
painful.
awkwardness.
Yeah. Or
Like-
somebody doesn't want to tell the whole story, or they don't want to offend, or...
And then it's
Only
dramatic irony.
Right.
Certain people don't.
Ooh.
Yeah. But it's a true reflection of what we have to deal with, and I would say that's especially within the church. Yeah, and it's just, for people that don't know, Aletheia, the church that puts this particular resource on, our leadership has basically a structure of, there's a Aletheia
In case you
logo back
forgot.
there. Our leadership has a basic understanding that you don't keep secrets. There are things which are private, and therefore should be shared with discretion.
Right.
But you don't keep secrets. And because secrets are built out of a mistrust, basically. And I can tell you, like, straight up in counseling with me, if I'm going to counsel somebody, I will flat out tell them, like, don't ask me to keep your secret, because I'm going to do with your secret what I want to. And so if you don't want my interaction, then just don't tell me, because I do what I want to. I do what I think is useful for you, and you're coming to me because you don't know what's useful for you. So I'm not going to let you define that information for me. I think that is the biblical method. I think that that we should be able to keep things private if it's necessary, but we should always do with information what's useful. And I think that, even in our law, there are certain things where it's like, where people are like mandated reporters, for instance, and they can keep secrets up to the point where it's not going to be harmful. So anyway, but I'm thinking about that in regard to church structures, and where you find a lot of sin hiding is where churches are allowed to keep secrets at a certain level. So whether it's, keeping a pastor's salary secret, or keeping, relationships secret, or keeping even information closed off to this section of the church unless they are this way. Like, we have meetings, for instance, as an eldership here. Our elder meetings are essentially invite only, but our conversations are not secret, So, yeah.
So you have the meeting notes available to people, or
If we remember to keep meeting notes, but we don't shy away from talking with people about it. Basically, every elder meeting that we have is meant to at some point be addressed with the congregation,
right?
Because the congregation needs to know, and I parent that way too. There are things where I'm like careful with how I present things to my kids because they can only handle so much, right?
Right.
But I'm not going to keep a secret from them. I might not share something with them because they can only handle so much. But as a matter of principle, like if they find out about it, I'm not going to lie to them. I'm not going to be like, oh no, that's just this, or Mommy and Daddy were just wrestling. That was a terrible one.
Oh my god.
It's not the most PG of
Where's
episodes.
the sound bit? Where's the sound bit?
This one right here.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Aletheia Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
Yeah, anyway. But yeah, and I think that a lot of times our growth as Christians does come from people trusting us with information, even if it's in the way that even if it's in a way that people can handle that information. That's the main thing, right? It's it doesn't have to be you need to know everything, but you need to know that something is safe to talk about, because like as adults looking at younger people, they're going through it too. Like I can tell you like that from being an adult and from being a younger person. Like I understand both positions, and it really goaded me. It really bugged me when the adults in power would treat the young people like that they weren't going through it too. Like they couldn't, like the tension wasn't culpable. Like it wasn't something that could be cut through with a knife. It's like we all knew that bad stuff was happening.
Right, and it fails to respect the fact that children not only have a certain level of intelligence, but also have a certain level, like, the children are persons. And it's like, then that they deserve a level of respect. And it's like, obviously, again, the way that you interact with them is going to vary because of the reality that you interact with different people differently. Like, that's just, you should. That's just how you should. But, like, the thing is that doesn't, the idea that it's like, oh, well, we just need to keep them, like, not talk to them about this, and that'll be better for them. It's like, no, they actually, there are a lot of things that you should be able to talk to them about and be able to trust them, like what you were saying, essentially.
Yeah, so is there anything that should be kept secret from a child, do you think?
Well, kept secret from, or, like having very, clear disclosure about.
Sorry, yeah, somebody opened a window and I can hear the cars passing by. Sorry, what was the question?
So, I mean, I guess, are you still using your distinction of, like, keeping a secret versus, like, being intentional with what you disclose? And how you disclose it?
Yeah. I'm talking about, like, being kept a secret. Like, under no circumstances should we tell this person this. Like, the worst one that I've seen, like, I've actually seen it, is we're not going to tell our children that there's a possibility that, mom and dad are getting a divorce.
Nice.
I think that one's really, really dangerous. I think the deeper issue is that you shouldn't be thinking about divorce. Yeah. So that's a whole nother issue. But, like, obviously that's something that's meaningful for this child, and they see the parents not interacting with each other and so on and so forth, and then all of a sudden they're in a different situation. I think that's a big deal. I think that's a problem. But even, like, within the church, are there things that shouldn't be said?
I mean, I guess something I would think of is, like, if you had something that you hadn't actually expressed to them, you'd been thinking about saying something that was wrong to the kid or something. You don't always have to be like, oh yeah, by the way, I was thinking about telling you that you're stupid. Like, that's probably something you can
but
keep
you probably
secret.
Wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
You have to keep a secret that your child is stupid, if they're stupid.
Like that, like, so I would say, like, if you're sinning in your mind, that's not always something you need to tell.
So what about something more practical, like somebody has committed a sin that is common knowledge amongst the adults, but you're not sure whether a kid should know? What do you guys think about that?
And that's an opportunity for a teaching moment. Like, show them, it's like, you shouldn't be doing this, because this is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially if it's a relationship. Like, I'm assuming that implies the kid knows the person. Yeah. It's like that. The kid's going to have to deal with the fallout of that as well. Like, that person is either, if they were sinned against, like, they might act differently. And being able to understand that, oh yeah, it's like something wrong was done to them, or being able to be like, oh, they messed up, and we're going to love them, like, and we've forgiven them, but we're going to have to work through some things with them, because it's like, how are they going to learn that if they aren't shown it?
Right.
Like, they're going to deal with that later in life, and how they deal with it is going to reflect, like, what they've been shown.
Yeah, better give them a safe place to work it out.
Right.
Rather than confuse them, like
'Cause
most
they're-
parents do.
Exactly, yeah, because they're going to deal with it sooner or later. It's just like, are they going to deal with it functionally and Christ-like, or are they going to deal with it dysfunctionally and like the world will tell them to, and how like just they will react in the moment. Like, a child has to be trained in like all aspects of life, not just how to tie a shoe and how to do algebra.
Wow.
I don't know. Those are the two things,
Okay,
man.
so
That's it.
Now we know
You know what she's gonna do for her
Caitlin.
kids.
Don't have kids.
So we're pretty sure Caitlin knows how to tie her shoe and do algebra.
She at least knows how to tie.
I mean, she's wearing laced shoes, and she was doing math earlier.
Another question.
That's what was on my mind.
Another question posted in our video comments here. Do you have to trust someone to have a relationship with them?
No.
No.
I feel like it would be impossible to start any relationships if you automatically had to trust the person before you
Right.
started
That's a good
having a
point.
relationship.
I can see why you wouldn't, though, unless you already did. And I think that a biblical mindset would be that you trust Christ to make the relationship happen. So
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing, is that we're commanded to love people, but we're not commanded to trust people. Like, there's the idea of being, like, wise as serpents and innocent as doves is it's like, we can forgive people, because, like you're saying, if our trust is in Christ, we can love people unconditionally. But that doesn't mean we have to trust them, like, as, like, that implies from a worldly sense of, oh, well, clearly they've changed, when there's no indication that they have. That's just being unwise.
yeah, well, and even if it's an unnatural burden to put 100%
Yeah.
trust in somebody. Like
Right.
I don't 100% trust my wife. Like, what I trust is that she fails. Like, I can always trust her intent, but I can't trust her follow through because she fails, and I don't want that type of burden placed on me. Like, that's a really important thing to understand. And I'm not saying that I don't meaningfully trust her or have a significant amount of trust in her, or that so much so that it couldn't be called an absolute trust in any sort of like practical means, because I do. I trust her and I feel I can say that confidently. But if we're going to try to put percentages on it, it could never be 100% and have that be a right burden placed on her.
Right. That's just not wise, because they'll always fail it.
Right. Well, because we're human, you know, we're human. We're not infinite. And yeah, the very first thing that I always say to a baby, and I always get to hold babies because, you know, I'm a pastor, so that's an aspect
That's
of
a
being.
thing we do.
It's a thing we do, right?
Holding babies.
Somebody has a baby. When somebody has a baby, they invite you over to pray for it.
Right.
You know, or you invite yourself.
Right.
So,
Like it or not.
and that's always the first thing
Come and
that
pray for me.
That's always the first thing that I tell a new person when I see them is everybody in the world is going to let you down except for God. We're going to try to do right by you, and you can trust our intent. Most people, you can trust their intent, but they're all going to let you down. Even me, even your mom, even your dad, but trust God. God will take care of you. And I know people I've said that to people before, and they've had like a really hard understanding of it. They have a hard time like processing it, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Have we tapped out our secrets? Let's see.
I mean, I can speak to the article. I'll pull Caitlin. Speaking about the article, you know, with secrets and like, you know, like the adults are talking, that is something that I experienced a lot in my childhood. And I think just it kind of affected me for a long time in how I interacted in relationships. Like, I am not a question asker. I will sometimes just be like, oh, no, these people are talking, I can't eavesdrop. or I'm secretly eavesdropping so no one can know. And like it's there's just a lot of different ways that it poorly affected my life. And then I just that's it. That's all. That's the end of my statement.
I'd say it did the same thing for me too. Like, my parents always kept secrets from me. Like, they would never talk to me directly about what was going on in their relationship, especially when I was younger. And then there's also been times where it's like they're outside, and so it's like their separate area, and so it's like they just act like I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even asleep, so that made no sense. But, like, I mean, it always caused me. It's like I always wondered what they were doing, because it's like I was a child, and it's like I wanted attention. But, I mean, yeah, I also wanted to know what was going in their life, because it seemed concerning, because it's like they're fighting all the time. And so that just causes, like, that caused me to worry more. Like,
Right.
Especially about, like, in relationship now. Like, it causes me to worry more about the relationship, because, like, if I feel like the slightest thing's, like, not being said, it's like I kind of, like, worry about it and, like, get up in my head about it now. And so...
Yeah. And thinking about, like, how another way that's affected me is just, I also really like to know what's going on, because, when it's the adults are talking, or, like, things, like, plans are being made, or things are going on, and I don't know them, and so I guess it's kind of made me, like, reach for that control and try to, like, keep it at all times, so then I get stressed out when I don't know what's going on.
Do you guys, do you think that those adults were trying to stress you out?
No.
They're trying to do the opposite.
They're trying
Right.
to keep you safe.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
But then if you just try to keep people in a bubble, then, A, they're going to have a crappy immune system. B,
they're going to have crappy relational functions.
yeah, everything's, it kind of stunts you a little bit, because,
Right.
Children especially are naturally curious. They want to know what's going on. They're like, why is the sky blue? Oh, why is there a cloud? There's a bird. So it's when you don't encourage that, as annoying as it can be from an adult perspective, like, it really, I don't know, it shapes people in a weird way.
Yeah, that's the thing, is, like, kids are so much smarter than you think, than people, like adults want to dumb them down and, like, keep them children, and that's what confuses them and, like, doesn't set them up for success. And I think with the secret thing, too, it's like, yeah, it's like they want to protect, and that's what they're trying to do, but it completely just, like, it's not cohesive. Yeah.
And children also act by example. So then if, it's adult time, like the adults, I keep saying this, but if the adults are, talking and the kids can't know, that, what are the kids going to do when they get older, or even now? They're like, oh, yes, the kids are talking. The adults can't know. Oh, we can't tell mom and dad.
Or it's even the
vase.
cliques. Yeah.
Yeah, they create, in different subs. I'm thinking about my relationship with my daughter, Sophia, who is almost 7, which is crazy. But I remember, so like I said, I don't keep secrets, but I will keep things private. And so this wasn't meant to be private, but but I'll just be like, I'm working, in having a discussion with her. And I remember one day she was really bothered about what that meant. She basically said to me, working, you're always working. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. You, like, go away and you're working and I can't talk to you. What does that mean? And it was, like, really bothersome for her. And so it wasn't meant to be secret and it wasn't meant to be private, but what it was an oversight on my part as to the way that my lack of interactivity with her was affecting her emotionally. So basically I sat down with her and I explained to her what I was doing in my job and how I was doing it, and basically told her, like, I would make sure that if she remembered to ask, and even if she didn't, I would try to remember to tell her. Now she doesn't ever want to hear what I do.
Makes sense.
Now she's like, okay, I get it. You're there for me.
Yeah.
Now I want to go play with my dolls. She doesn't really play with dolls. She plays with action figures.
Plays with Barbies.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Sometimes.
She had a fashion show one time.
Yes.
That's not
I
something
won.
to do with them. Like,
Yeah.
dressing them up, or, like, making
It
like,
depends.
what they're doing.
You can make people do really funny, like, little story plays. That was fun.
Yeah, like
So
Team America. I used to hang my sister's Barbies.
And we digress.
Relationships.
Don't hang your sister's Barbies.
It'll mess up your relationships. You have to keep
Things
secrets.
Pastor Josh says.
My dad-
I'm not keeping secrets on the little punk child that I was.
Fair enough.
To
So-
call my dad out, he apparently used to blow his stepsister's Barbie doll heads off. So.
Yep, there you go. He happens to be another pastor of this church.
Yes.
Come to Alethea, you'll get your Barbies destroyed.
Don't bring your Barbies.
Well, we got about 30 minutes left of our allotted time. We can try to tackle this last article, which you just posted at the end there, Josh, before we went on about.
I might have tried to truncate it.
Oh.
Might have.
Let's tackle it for 15 minutes or so.
Alright.
We'll just sort of fumble our way through it.
Fumble.
I'll try to read this pretty quickly, so stay
Hopefully
with
it works.
me. It used to be pretty easy. Two people would indicate interest in one another, and in some way you'd start as friends. And at some point you'd ask the awkward question, and you'd go on a date, and you'd realize you'd have to have that question, that conversation too. Hey, are we dating now? That kind of stuff. And it just happened. Somehow it became really, really complicated, and then the patriarchy movement came along with this idea that you needed to do courtship. That was the right way
That
to date.
patriarchy.
Then you started
The order
hearing
it
people
came
talk
around,
about
actually.
dorkship. I'll have to explain
What?
that is.
Dorkship?
That's what it says in the
Which
article.
was some weird
I need to
dating,
look this
courting hybrid, and it
Oh,
just
okay.
became
That
really,
makes
really
sense.
difficult.
I'm
That's
good
the
with
original
it.
term. It sounds like, I don't know. Well, I think you've got to understand that Satan's great desire for a couple is that they would have as much sex before they get married as possible. He wants couples to bring all sorts of baggage into marriage, to do all sorts of regrettable things. And don't assume that you'll be the one couple or the other, or the one person who never struggles in this way. It's God's good desire that the sexual desire grows throughout your relationship, leading to marriage. In fact, it's more concerning if there is no sexual desire than if there is. So there ought to be growth of that desire, yet it ought to be kept under control until it can be consummated with the marriage relationship. Should I keep going or should we go there? I'll keep going. There's only a little bit left.
Yeah.
Community is so helpful and appealing to other people. Can you ask us hard questions? That's the best thing you can do. Find an older couple, give them absolute freedom to ask you difficult questions, and then commit between the two of you. And you will always ask, the two of you, you will always ask no answer honestly. What?
I think that's a bad truncation.
Okay.
My bad.
I'll fast forward. How are you doing? Are you behaving? Are you sleeping together? Asking you those blunt questions that will be tremendously, tremendously helpful. I think there's sarcasm there. You can appeal to them, you can ask them for help, you can ask them for prayer, but so much of the Christian life comes down to this. I want to be holy more than I want to sin. So pray that God would give you a deep desire for holiness, take away the desire to sin. That's a really interesting truncation there.
It was very fast.
Okay, so we'll try to tackle
There was a point where I noticed Secrets is not going to be much longer. I need to hurry.
So,
Read the full article, number 1.
yeah, Jasmine posted the full article.
I did do that.
But so, what is our understanding and treatment of relationships when it comes to sexuality? We'll just go with the broad general question.
Romantic relationships.
Romantic
basically.
relationships, because that's probably what a large portion of the audience now and in the future would be interested in, I would imagine.
Well, we can just say that the word dorkship is really romantic.
Yeah, clearly it's from the Bible. Direct translation.
Yeah, what does a Christian biblical romance relationship look like to you guys?
You're married.
Way to go. Let's get it started.
Yeah, so having been in that experience, well, I mean, just as a whole, like romantically, or like, what does that entail?
I would say, like, what are the... Yeah, exactly. That's the question. I would say, like, what are the challenges that you face in having a biblical romantic relationship? And sorry, I was looking at the computer. And what do you like more than that? Like what? No, that's the same thing. Yeah. What are the challenges that you've faced, and where have you found successes?
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of case by case with relationships. It's not all gonna be like, there's not like a, guidebook on what to do. Like, people have different, limits and boundaries and everything. For me, it was, or for us, I guess, it was, like, basically nothing until marriage. Like, we didn't even kiss. And that was challenging. I mean, it's, like, self-control and, challenge in that and wanting to be with that person, but then, like, and wanting to express that, but then also, like, wanting to be pure before God, and obviously that is higher than the first part. So yeah.
What was the greatest challenge in that? Like in getting from point A to point B, what would you say was the greatest challenge?
Is point B marriage, just or all?
Yeah, probably. Well, I think she said being pure before God, so I would take it to that. Like having a relationship, so a marriage relationship that's pure before God. What would you say is the greatest challenge that you faced? Like self, or like your lust, essentially, or what is put onto you by like society, or misconceptions about things, or I don't know, like any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think probably self is the biggest one. I feel like people thought it was very weird the way that we went about things, and we did get married very quickly. So it's like, it wasn't like years and years. So I think that people kind of thought that was weird, but not that weird, because it wasn't like, years of doing that. But I definitely think it's not common nowadays. And yeah.
Hayden, I'm interested to hear from you, because you are basically pretty new to Christ, right? And you, as you said earlier, are in a relationship. How has that been? Because you had relationships before Christ.
Yeah.
So how has that been?
That's where society would honestly take a role, where it's like, yeah. Yeah, the hardest thing would be our boundaries, and yeah, constantly dealing with those, and like what's like right for our relationships with God, and like and like what makes sense for us to like keep them at. Yeah, and that's, society and lust takes roles in that, like where it like influences where we should be. Because I mean, being in relationships before, it's like you feel bad like if you don't give that person like what you gave those other people, like yeah. And so that's where it takes a role, but I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. Do you find so you still find that that's difficult even in a Christian relationship, though, right? Yeah, so my wife and I, we've been married for 10 years. Before that, we were together for 3 years. And before that, I wasn't in a relationship with anybody. And we had a pretty complex set of rules that we had established over time. And that we established in the beginning. And there were moments in time where I was just like, and I don't think it was really out of lust, but where I was like, we could totally not follow through with these rules, and nobody would know about it, and B, I'm confident that we're going to be married. So what difference does it make? Like, marriage is a relationship between you, God, and that other person. Like, if we were on a deserted island today and we wanted to have sex and we couldn't escape, would I be not, like, married to you? You know? And so, and there was only a couple times in our relationship where we had those conversations. But the ability to have those conversations and the discipline of anytime you make a decision, it's a decision that's rationally made and not a decision that's emotionally made, kept our relationship pure by God's standards, you know, because at times where I'd be like, okay, I'm willing to compromise this, she would be like, no, you're not. you that's not who you say you want to be. So no, you can't do that. And vice versa. Where, you know, I could say that to her. And that is because of discipline. It's because of stating from the outset that the purpose of the relationship is to make each other pure before God. It's not, you know, to have companionship. Although that's a amazing outcome. So that's the thing that I guess I would ask is, what's your guys' experience with that mentality in relationship within the church amongst, like, Christians? Is that, like, Christians in school, in any institution where you see Christians, has it been your impression that the way that relationship is presented to you is one where it's like, this is your life partner that is going to hold you accountable to who they know you say you want to be, versus this is your partner essentially to partake in the fruits of marriage with? Does that make sense? Do you guys understand the question?
I don't.
Somebody can...
So essentially, it's like, do we see Christians following more of a biblical ideal of what romantic relationships are meant to be, or do we see, and I would go with the latter. I think we see a lot more where the world has influenced even the very basis of the discussion of what relationships are, because it's like, the thing is it's like, obviously being pure before God, like, just like sexually, and not having sex before marriage is very important, and that's a very very uniquely Christian thing. Mm-hmm. And so, but a Christian romantic relationship is so much more than that. Like what Josh was saying, it's meant to make each other pure before God. That's the exact opposite of what the world will tell you. The world will tell you that being in a romantic relationship, as the first article was talking about, is for your own benefit. It's to make yourself happy. You can't have two more, like, diametrically opposed, like, primary goals. The issue the issue is that the second one promises to give you temporal satisfaction, but it only leaves you broken. Whereas the first one is difficult and it takes a lot of work, but it actually, like, it's like a C.S. Lewis quote. Like, if you aim for earth, if you aim for heaven, you get earth thrown in, but if you aim for earth, you get neither. It's kind of like that.
That's C.S. Lewis.
I know.
Man, he's so good.
And so it's
he's no Francis Schaeffer, but...
And so it's like, we don't have that outlook usually. It's like, oh yeah, well, we're Christians and we're gonna date, and yeah, we won't have sex before marriage, but we're just gonna, you know, see how it is and see if we have chemistry and stuff and see if we make each other happy. Mm-hmm. That's not the purpose of marriage. The purpose of marriage is this lifelong covenant that is supposed to be a reflection of Christ and his church. Mm-hmm. Like, do you understand, like, the burden of that? Like, it's a burden, but it's beautiful. And it's like, when you take that away, it's like you take away the burden, but you take away the beauty of it. And it's like, the reality is this, it's like, if that is actually your goal, it's like, that changes the whole, like even the discussion of how that pursuit looks. Because it's, like, suddenly it's like, no, like, I'm searching for the person who will be a lifelong companion in the search of holiness, rather than the search of happiness. That looks a lot different. And it's like, yeah, there's a lot that entails, but I think that's the fundamental starting point.
Has it been your guys' experience, those of you who have experience with growing up in church, or have a long-term experience with church? So I guess, Hayden, that sort of disqualifies you. Has it been your experience that that's modeled for you by adults within the church?
No. I mean, on occasion, but most of the time, no. I mean, part of that's, like, when we're talking about secrets, it's like, oh, well, that's just a grown-up thing.
Mm.
Right, but we're growing up. Like,
right.
And so it's like...
Here's a secret. I'll reveal a secret of being grown up now that I'm 2 years away from 40. There's no such thing as a grown-up thing, and grown-ups aren't grown-ups in their minds. That's the thing. Like, the Matrix introduced a concept they call residual self-image, which I really like. But it's like how you see yourself, right? Like, grown-ups don't see themselves as... Like, an 80-year-old rarely sees himself as an 80-year-old. He sees himself as, basically somebody who's in his prime who's gotten weaker over time. And that's why he talks about the good old days. Mm-hmm. So, like, this idea of, like parents, they still see their parents as their parents. Right. It's kind of crazy. Kids see their parents as the prime adult, but parents, they don't see themselves as the prime adult. Generally, they see... In my experience, they see their parent as still the prime adult, and they have a really hard time when their parent displays weakness.
Yeah.
So, just in that concept of relationship, like you're saying, like, it's a grown-up thing, like, that's how people talk about it. I agree that's how people talk about it, but it's smokescreen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not how they actually see it. I think it's just a lazy way of not having to address something that they don't know how to address, basically. That's my admonition and condemnation of my generation.
With love.
Yeah.
From Josh.
Yeah. But yeah, like, so, but going back to my question, like, is that your experience? Caitlin says, no, not really. Is it your experience that within the church itself or within Christian relationships, like in a high school, so now I can't ask about your experience, that holiness over really any other type of relationship is what's put in play? I can tell you from a marriage counseling standpoint, as a pastor, I've had the honor of marriage counseling, and I'd say 90% of my marriage counseling experiences are about either reminding people or sometimes outright informing them that that's what a relationship is for, and it's not about whatever reason they got into the relationship, which is kind of hard, right? Because you go into marriage counseling, and as Christians, and you have a certain expectation, the ground rules for it, and basically what you have to tell people is, no, you have to throw away your ground rules. You have to rewrite your
working.
Yep, they haven't been working well for you. That's why you're here to begin with, and you have to rewrite your entire thought process on relationship.
Yeah, counseling.
Yep. But yeah, so I don't know. Like, what's your experience in the school? Like, do you ever see other Christian couples in the school?
No.
No. Okay.
Not at all.
Do you?
I don't know a lot of couples, and then like the most couples that I do know like break up after like a month.
Yeah, that's high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
My experience with it, observing it, would be like that the Christian couples, were saving themselves, but, skirted around in every other way that they possibly could. Really,
yeah.
Right.
Sinning in that way,
Right.
Like, just actively trying to think
Loophole.
of whatever, loophole. And
yeah. Right, because like I said, that's the defining thing, which is, again, it's a super important aspect of it, but it's just an aspect of it.
Mhm.
Like,
Right.
if you don't have that as the foundation, it's like, I'm not surprised at all that that's
And
how...
yeah.
Yeah, I've said.
I was just thinking of an episode of Superstore that just aired, and they were giving advice to a girl at her quinceañera, and they were talking about that. Just everybody, all the adults were telling her to basically save her virginity, and one of the non-family members said something that was... Anyway, just about, like, yeah, save your virginity, but basically there's other ways.
Yeah.
You know, the loophole is always the butt or the mouth.
Okay.
It's true. And sexuality. And that's how people do things, you know, and it's not appropriate. Like, how does that make you more holy? Just saying. So, things Pastor Josh says.
That's the sound clip we need.
The upper
That's
story,
the
where we
sound
talk
clip
about
we need.
things that aren't not.
Is that what we need? No, but
Yes.
that's my experience.
Yeah.
That's my experience with Christians in working with Christians and working with Christian young people, is that if they don't understand what purity is and what the reason for a relationship is, then they will give way, and oftentimes they'll find some sort of way which deviates but still accomplishes their own lust or desire. And the statistics are staggering. Like, I remember when Jen was going to, I think it was junior high, and the statistics on oral in junior high was like, it was like 30% or something like that of kids in junior high had experienced oral. Like, what is that? I mean, we're talking about kids between the ages of, what is that, like 12 and 14? I mean, that's crazy.
It's so sad because they are kids.
Yes.
Like you were saying with the parent thing, like looking. I just remember being a kid and looking at those teenagers and like, one day I'll be a teenager, and it's like, oh, I'm a teenager. Like, you know, it's like kids, like babies.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, and the sad thing about it is that there's a checking off the box on relationship where basically they want to do right by God, and so because they want to do right by God, they're not willing to do these things, but they are willing to do these other things. Well, you have to ask yourself why. And I think the reason why is because they're not taught what right by God means.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really sad, because once they do learn, then it's something that's really sad. So, yeah. Yeah, that's it's real here in the upper story.
Yeah. Someone want to end on a better note than that, because we're going to wrap up.
God. It's too much pressure.
Read Hosea.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all we got.
What? So, okay, fine. I'll do a summary. Okay, so, like, if your goal isn't to marry, you're not ready to date. And if you're not ready to marry, it's like, because that's the thing, is that marriage should be the end goal. Because otherwise, and a right understanding of marriage should be the end goal. An idea of marriage where it's to glorify God and it's to pursue God together. Because like I was saying earlier, it's like when you're in this this marriage partnership, like you're able to pursue God more effectively because you're able to support one another. The like idea that a cord of three is not easily broken, like because community is so helpful in supporting one another. But the thing is it's like without that idea of happiness is not our prime directive, it's holiness, like that changes the discussion, and then you can actually understand why it's like, no, it's not just not having sex as normally defined, it's just it's being pure before God, and what that and it's a more encompassing than that. It's pursuing Him in the relationship, and finding someone that will help in that.
So let me ask this question. Has that been difficult for you all?
Well,
like to remember that, like, because obviously people would make fun of me. So like I said, I'm 38. So if you did the math on what I was saying, essentially I started dating when I was 24. And by dating, what that really means is I was ready to marry.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd found the person that I believed could make me more holy before God. So I started courting, I suppose, at 24. But there were people who made fun of me, even within the church, who basically said that there was something wrong with me. Even asked me if I was gay. And I understand, I'm very flamboyant. So, but in any case, so my response to them was, look, it's easy to get into a relationship. You know? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. If I wanted to have sex, I honestly could. Have you seen the people that have sex?
I thought we were gonna end on a better note than this.
But no, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Like, go into like all of your cliques. It doesn't matter what clique it is in a school. It can be the weeaboos. I mean, people wanting to be in a relationship and taking it to that end. That is very, very easy to do. It's wanting to have the right type of relationship that will make you pure before God. That's what I'm looking for, and that's why I'm not in a relationship. And when that relationship comes, I'll jump at it. Like, has that been difficult for you guys in holding that mentality, like on a personal level, holding that mentality, but then also like fighting off the mentality of the world, because we're a visually inundated and stimulated culture that every time we turn around, we're being told, A, that relationship is not what it has been defined by for. It's completely what you want it to be. And then B, you can have relationship on your terms through apps where you can just hook up with anybody, no strings attached, or really any. I mean, it's just so available. Pornography. It's so available. So like, how has it been? And I guess Adam, you're the only other guy on the panel, but for y'all in the younger category, like women, like how has it been for you guys in terms of being able to be solid in that versus wavering? Because I see, we're not all 100% consistent, even if we eventually win the war. Like, has it been difficult? That's the question. Has it been difficult to be the person that you ought to be?
I think it has been, but at the same time, I'm incredibly blessed because I have a lot of support in that. So there has been times, and especially this is not what I'm not. Basically, before I moved out, when I lived with my parents, it has nothing to do with them. Just it wasn't the same amount of support. I live communally, so I have a lot of people all around me. I live specifically with 3 other girls. We're all the single ladies room, and I have a lot of support in just this is A, what a godly woman should look like, B, we can all hold each other accountable, and then C, we have relationship. That's it. End of statement. Who's next? Go.
Yeah, I'd say it's been hard, for sure. With temptations, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to word things. But, yeah, it's definitely been hard. I don't know, what was the question again?
I mean, I think you answered it. I'm just looking for an honest answer. Because, we're giving, this is where it should be. I just want people to understand, as humans, sometimes it's hard to be where it should be. And I just want to get a better feel for that. So I'm just, people being good examples isn't always about people being perfect examples.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity.
So
You learn from other people's mistakes.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jasmine that I do have lost support, or I do, and I had in the past, and I wasn't perfect. Like Jake and I tiptoed on that line, and so like that temptation, but we're like, yeah, but that's yeah, we're not perfect, but we're trying our hardest, and yeah, everyone is able to hold us accountable, and so that's the beauty of that, because some people don't have any accountability or support community in that way.
What about you?
I mean, for me, I've never had a boyfriend, so for me, the biggest issue has been just like knowing so clearly like what I actually want long term, and then like wrestling with like the emotions of what I want right now. Especially like it's just like you're saying, it's everywhere. It's just this idea like it has to be now, and it has to be it essentially has to be now, whereas it's like I know it's not always going, it isn't necessarily going to be right now, and just being patient in that, because it's like I'm really a romantic person. I just, no one expects it, and I'm a very like, I struggle with emotions, and I have a lot of them, but yeah.
Yeah, what was I gonna say? I was just, with your point of like what you're looking for and being specific in that, one thing, piece of advice. Basically all of the women in Aletheia, the single women, have written up what we call needs list, which is just like things that we require of any man who's going to date / marry us. Marry, emphasis on the marry, but just like first thing, man of God. Second thing, like this is things that I need to feel supported, and like things that I know will help me be holy or before God. So, piece of advice.
But I
Should
already
have had people do
know
at
that.
school.
I just
I know, and that doesn't make it easier necessarily, because if you're single and hormonal and a teenager or just a person, like
thanks.
no.
Shots fired.
I'm making a very bad attempt to relate, but like it's difficult. Like you want those things, like you want to be in that kind of romantical relationship, and I don't know how to say
Romantical.
things.
Like I think we need to add that word to the
And this
dictionary.
is how we transfer to the next person. Yeah.
I think it's a good point, and I think
There
it's
is
good
a point.
advice. And going back to the article, one of the things that he says is find like an older couple that can hold you accountable, and so on and so forth. One of the things
Is
that
he
we
being sarcastic in the article?
I don't
couldn't
know.
tell.
It's really
The way-
difficult.
the way
I
was
couldn't
reading it,
tell
so-
either, so read it and decide for yourselves
Read us and tell
the
us
things
in the
been posted.
comments.
But with that said, we take that sort of advice seriously, and the idea of a needs list is something that really opens the door to a meaningful accountability. And what's interesting is that needs list is given to the entire support system and not just to the guy. So for instance, if Jasmine's ready to date somebody, for instance, she would give that needs list to the guy, and then the guys in her life would also know that needs list, and so they would be able to hold that guy accountable to that needs list.
And they would all have shotguns.
And it becomes a communal process in that regard. And it's funny, like it sounds like outlandish, but the truth is, like, the scripture is our larger needs list, right?
That's true.
And that's the thing that people forget. It's like we need to hold each other accountable to even the scripture on a universal level. So, yeah, that's one thing that the women here do willingly.
Yes,
I just wanna-
we're not obligated. It's not like, oh, you're coming here now. Here are
Sign it
things
in
that you need
blood.
to do. Yes.
Right. This is what you must do to be a part of this
And now
church.
you are forever in prison.
But it's something that the women generally do because it's very helpful.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good note to end on. That's a better note. To end
Yes,
But
it
the
is.
end on a better note.
Now let me give you an anecdote. that
No.
can-
No!
Obviously, the discussion can continue on the video, right? comments can continue after. The
Yeah, you
video
can
is
post more
posted, right?
comments.
Yeah, so
if I see them,
feel free
that's-
to comment and ask
All of it.
questions and ask advice or whatever in terms of tonight's show. And thank you for participating and being here now and in the future. I was gonna say now and in the future, right? Because
I like it. I
we got
like it.
people to
Sounds
listen to
groovy.
this later as
And
well.
then I feel excluded.
Yeah. I would invite our listeners to our next show here at Aletheia, which is next month. It's our cross-examination panel discussion. The topic of that will be denominations, so you can look forward to that. It's on the last Sunday of the month. And just a reminder, Cross-X is just a panel discussion with local pastors where they talk theology in plain language. So you can look forward to that. It's on the last Sunday of every other month, so that's May, and then July, every other month, rotating. So again, denominations, look forward to that. If you haven't already, you should go to the Vigilance Radio Network Facebook page. That is our Facebook group page.
It's a Facebook group.
Facebook group page.
No one can tell.
It's our network for producing everything we're doing here at Aletheia. So you can find the Upper Story podcast. You can find the cross-examination videos on there. You can find the other podcasts we're doing here at Aletheia. Basically, that's our network. That's where we produce all of our shows, and that's where you can find those things. So feel free to go over there, like and subscribe, or follow, whatever you have to do on a group page. All of the above. Follow.
Join group.
Join group.
That's fine.
So look to that. Obviously, share the event, share this podcast with your friends if you think it's something they could find
Useful.
Useful, yeah. And lastly, if you are without a church home and need a good starting point for getting back into your faith, we have a service for that. You can reach out to three of us here, Jasmine, myself, and Josh. Via Facebook, and we have a service for plugging you in and getting an idea of where you're coming from in terms of your relationship with God, your understanding of what that means, and all of that. So, yeah, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to the Yellow Couch members tonight on the Upper Story podcast, and we look forward to next time. Thank you, guys.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Aletheia Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.